We often turn to lawmakers to solve our problems, whether they exist or not. We don't like something, or it's their job to fix it and regulate it. That's how we're supposed to understand it. There's another option, though. People or corporations could regulate themselves and solve the problem independently, right? What kind of problems, you might be asking? Well, let's start with a big one. How about the cost of drugs, pharmaceutical drugs? Harvard estimates these alone account for 17% of all medical costs. But they argue it shouldn't. All right, let's bring in Andrew Bartline here, who's looking at the cost of insulin for us specifically today, because we know of one company that is now basically dropping their costs, capping their costs, and what it costs, or what they charge for like insulin.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what it is. It's one company making a decision, but from our discussions today, it sounds like that could have some larger implications. It's called Eli Lilly, that's the name of the company, and they say nobody will spend more than $35 out of pocket to pay for their most common types of insulin. This is a life-saving drug for many people with diabetes, and in Idaho alone, that accounts for nearly 10% of the adults. And look at how we compare as a country. This graph is 2018 data from the Rand Corporation. They did a study in 2020 with these numbers. The U.S. costs are several times higher than other countries, like 14 times higher, sometimes as little as 7 times higher even. The Diabetes Alliance of Idaho says Eli Lilly capping out-of-pocket costs goes a long way here in Idaho, and we talked to their outgoing executive director, Ashley Rundle, today. She says she's been involved in this conversation for a long time about getting potential costs on the cap, or getting potential caps on the cost of insulin.
We hear, unfortunately, several stories around individuals who might be trying to stretch the utilization of their insulin, or not taking the amount of insulin that they're prescribed because they're trying to make it last longer. There was actually some studies done out of Yale back in 2018 that said a quarter of individuals diagnosed with type 1 and type 2 diabetes were doing that. They were not taking the prescribed amount of insulin because they were trying to make it last longer. We also hear stories of individuals who are having to decide between buying groceries for their family or buying their insulin. So there's just a lot of unfortunate heartbreak out there when it comes to making that decision on where to cut costs and where to spend your money.
So when Eli Lilly comes out and says we're going to cap out-of-pocket costs at $35, what does that tell you?
It tells me that we are finally making an impact in the conversations that we're having. The difference between having a legislative decision to reduce the cost versus an individual organization decision is these organizations can now set the stage for how that could look. It's almost providing a template for other pharmaceutical companies to follow.
How big of a win is that? Did you anticipate something like this to happen?
I honestly did not. Me personally, I was really banking on some legislative decisions to come out, and we still might see that. But at this time, having an organization step up and make that commitment, I think I got the alert at 6:30 in the morning yesterday and was just ecstatic to see the news.
Obviously, you don't work for Eli Lilly, but I'm struggling to wrap my head around why a company would voluntarily make a move that realistically results in less revenue.
Because it's the right thing to do. The cost of insulin is astronomical, and so when you're looking at an average cost of potentially $500 a month to just receive your insulin for your care, that is a really high number and an expensive cost for the average American. Being able to look at the human as a human and not just a patient, not just a dollar amount.
And how would that impact somebody in Idaho who relies on insulin? You said this is life-saving for people, but that's just one company. So how does that impact an Idahoan?
It is an amazing first step. Is how I would like to put it. This is just the beginning. So if an individual receives insulin that happens to be coming from Eli Lilly, then this will directly impact them, right? Reducing their rate by 70%. Now, if individuals are receiving insulin that are not distributed by Eli Lilly, then there is not going to necessarily be a change at this time. However, we anticipate that this is just the beginning of the conversation of change.
Do you have a reason to believe that any other companies are going to watch this and decide to make a similar decision?
If history proves itself, I anticipate that this is going to start a ripple effect. I hope. I think I'm going to live in the side of rose-colored glasses a little bit and anticipate some change across the board. And so individuals who are still struggling to afford their insulin and are seeing this, I'm hoping that it provides that glimmer of hope that we're headed in the right direction.
A 2022 report from the American Diabetes Association says the annual cost of diabetes care is $1.3 billion. That's for Idaho specifically. And if you get a comparison, or to give you a comparison, medical care for people with diabetes alone, that costs more than the entire Medicaid expansion budget that's gotten pushback from state lawmakers who continue to say it's out of control. Well, this is larger than that. Idahoans with diabetes have medical bills as well, Brian, that are 2.3 times higher than the average person, you could say, or somebody who doesn't have diabetes.
Because usually it's not just diabetes you're dealing with.
There's
it leads to other things.
Added complications there, yeah. So their medical bills are just naturally larger. So she says that this is a good starting point to helping these people who are already burdened by a system that's difficult. Well, she says this is a good step in the right direction.
That graph that shows the comparison between the United States and other countries, now that would drop, but it's still more than twice as much in America insulin would be than any other country on that list.
Yeah, I mean, there's some countries on that list where it's like $6 or $7.
Right.
35 Progress, it's only one company, but again, still much more than what you'd find elsewhere.
All right, thanks, Andrew.